The tavern was quiet that evening, too quiet for a place where travelers usually laughed, drank, and sang songs. The only sound was the soft crackle of fire from the hearth, and the gentle footsteps of a young waitress moving from table to table. She was not someone the world would notice. She was small, thin, her brown hair tied back simply, her face pale from long hours of work. To most, she was invisible, just another human serving drinks in the Dragon Kingdom. But tonight, something strange was about to happen, something that would change not only her life, but the future of an empire. She carried a tray of wooden cups, her hands steady despite the murmurs of the guests. Most of them were dragons in their human forms, tall, proud, with glowing eyes that seemed to burn even when they smiled. They looked down at her as if she were nothing, a servant not worth remembering. She never argued, never raised her voice. That was why people called her the Silent One. Yet in her silence, she noticed things others missed. And tonight, she noticed a sound that froze her heart. It was faint at first, like the weak cry of an animal. She stopped near the door to the back kitchen, her head tilting. The cry came again, soft, trembling, filled with pain. Not the cry of an animal, not quite human either. She placed her tray down and followed the sound, her bare feet making no noise on the wooden floor. The other workers were too busy to notice her slip away. In the corner near a pile of crates, she found a basket covered with cloth. The crying came from inside. Slowly, carefully, she pulled the cloth back, and her eyes widened in shock. Inside was a baby dragon. Its scales were a pale silver, almost translucent, as if its strength had been drained away. Its tiny wings were bent awkwardly, as if broken. Its eyes, large and shining, were wet with tears. The creature was weak, shivering, and clearly in pain. The waitress gasped softly but did not run. Most humans in her place would have screamed or fled, for dragons were dangerous, and their young even more so if parents were nearby. But she saw something different. She saw a helpless child. Without thinking, she reached into the basket and gently lifted the baby dragon into her arms. The creature whimpered, pressing against her chest. She whispered softly, "Shoo. It's all right, you are safe." Her hands trembled at first, but she held it firmly, as she once held sick children during the war. She did not think of fear. She only thought of the small life that needed comfort. But at that very moment, the air inside the tavern shifted. The ground seemed to tremble. The customers froze, cups halfway to their mouths, eyes wide with sudden dread. A shadow darkened the doorway. Slowly, every head turned, and silence spread like fire across dry grass. The waitress, still holding the baby dragon, felt the weight of eyes upon her, though she did not yet know whose. The door opened wider, and a figure entered. He was tall, taller than any man, his presence filling the entire room. His cloak shimmered with black and gold, his eyes burning like molten fire. He was the Dragon Emperor himself, the ruler of all dragonkind, feared across the lands, said to bring storms with his rage and fire with his breath. No one dared to breathe too loudly when he appeared, for his power alone demanded silence. The waitress froze, her arms tightening around the baby dragon instinctively. She did not know this child was his. She only knew it was weak and needed her. But the Emperor's gaze had already locked on her, and his expression was unreadable. The tavern seemed to shrink under his presence. Every guest bowed their heads in fear, waiting for fire to burn the foolish human girl who dared to touch royal blood. The Emperor's steps were heavy, each one echoing like thunder in the quiet hall. He stopped just a few feet away, his eyes burning into her face, then down to the fragile child in her arms. For a moment, no one breathed. The waitress felt her heart hammering against her chest. She expected death. She expected flames. Yet she did not put the child down. She simply lowered her head slightly and whispered to the baby dragon, "It's all right. Don't cry. I won't let you go." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched as if he was holding back an ocean of emotion. He raised one hand, and the entire tavern gasped, waiting for fire to swallow the human girl. But instead of fire, silence filled the air. The Emperor's hand lowered slowly, his gaze fixed not on the waitress, but on the way the child had stopped crying in her arms. The baby dragon, weak and broken, had closed its eyes and pressed against her heart as if it trusted her more than anyone else. Whispers spread across the room. Why does she still live? Why does the Emperor not destroy her? Why does the child not fear her? Fear turned into confusion, confusion into awe. The silent waitress stood, her arms steady, her eyes calm, and in that moment she looked less like a servant and more like something greater, something no one yet understood. The Emperor's voice finally broke the silence, low and dangerous, yet heavy with something else, something strange. He said only 4 words, but they made the entire tavern shiver. "Bring her to me." The waitress looked up, her heart pounding. She had no idea why the most powerful being in the kingdom wanted her, but she knew one thing: her life would never be the same again. The tavern was silent, so silent that even the sound of the fire in the hearth seemed to vanish. Every dragon in the room sat frozen, their heads lowered, afraid to move or even breathe. The Dragon Emperor stood like a mountain, his black and gold cloak flowing behind him as if the air itself bent to his will. His eyes, burning with fire and power, were fixed on the small human girl holding his fragile child. The human waitress kept her eyes down, her arms wrapped protectively around the baby dragon who had stopped crying and was resting against her chest. Her heart was racing so fast she thought it might break through her ribs, but she did not put the child down. She could not. Something deep inside her told her the baby needed her more than anyone else in that room. The Emperor's silence was worse than his rage. Everyone waited for him to speak, to unleash fire that would reduce the girl to ash, yet he did nothing. Instead, his eyes narrowed, sharp as blades, watching every small detail. The way she held the child, the calm way she whispered to it, the steady strength in her arms despite the fear written across her face. His gaze lingered on the baby dragon, whose wings were bent and weak, whose scales were dull instead of bright. The Emperor felt a deep pain twist in his chest. He had hidden his child from the world, ashamed that even the strongest healers could not fix the child's broken body. And yet here, in the arms of a simple human girl, his son looked peaceful, as if he belonged nowhere else. The Emperor took a slow step forward, and the room shook with the weight of his power. The dragons around the tables bowed lower, their heads nearly touching the floor. The waitress trembled, her knees weak, but she did not run. She raised her eyes just a little, enough to see the Emperor's shadow fall over her. His face was hard, carved from stone, his eyes burning like a storm ready to break. She thought he would demand she return the child at once, but instead he asked in a voice low and thunderous, "Do you know whose blood you touch?" The words were heavy, like chains falling around her. The girl swallowed, her lips dry. She shook her head slowly and whispered, "No, but I know he is a child." The tavern gasped. No one dared to speak so simply to the Emperor. Some of the dragon nobles stared in horror, waiting for flames to devour her. But the Emperor's eyes only narrowed further, his gaze sharp as fire. He stepped even closer, his towering frame filling her vision, his power pressing down on her like a mountain. "A child," he repeated, his voice cold, almost mocking, yet beneath it was something else, something hidden. "Do you not fear me, human?" The waitress felt her hands tremble but held the baby tighter. Her voice was soft but steady when she answered, "I fear many things, but not a child who cries." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The Emperor's eyes locked onto hers, searching, testing, as if he could burn away her soul with his gaze. What he found there was not defiance, not arrogance, but something he had almost forgotten existed in humans: gentle courage. His jaw clenched. His hand lifted slightly, and the room shook as if the world itself braced for destruction. Dragons flinched, ready to witness her end. But then, his hand lowered. His eyes narrowed one last time, and in a voice that made the walls tremble, he gave a single command. "Bring her to the palace." The words rolled across the room like thunder. Gasps spread among the dragons. None could believe what they had heard. A human waitress, taken to the Dragon Emperor's palace? Such a thing had never happened. The waitress's heart raced even faster. She wanted to speak, to protest, to beg to stay in her small life, but her voice was trapped in her throat. Guards in black armor moved forward, bowing before their emperor, then turning their sharp eyes toward her. They did not touch her roughly, but their presence alone made her knees weaken. The baby dragon stirred, making a soft noise, and she hushed him gently, forgetting her own fear for a moment. The emperor watched the way she comforted the child, and though his face remained unreadable, deep inside his chest something cracked, something he would not admit even to himself. He turned sharply and left the tavern, his cloak sweeping the floor behind him. No one dared to move until he was gone. Only then did whispers break out among the guests. Why did he not kill her? Why take a human to the palace? What is she to him? The waitress did not answer, could not answer. She was escorted out into the night, the cool air biting at her skin. The sky above was dark, filled with stars, but she felt no beauty in it, only fear of what awaited her. Behind her, the tavern remained silent, every guest shaken by what they had witnessed. The Dragon Emperor had narrowed his eyes, not in rage, but in thought, as if he had seen something in her no one else could. And now, the fate of the silent waitress was tied to the fate of the kingdom itself. The news spread faster than fire across dry grass. By dawn, every corner of the Dragon Kingdom whispered the same shocking story. A human girl had touched the emperor's disabled child and lived. Not only lived, she had been taken to the emperor's palace under his protection. For dragons, this was something unthinkable. Humans were considered weak, unworthy, creatures allowed to survive only at the edges of the empire. Yet one nameless waitress had broken that rule without even meaning to. In the markets, merchants paused their trading to gossip in hushed tones. "She held him, I swear," one said, eyes wide. And the child stopped crying. The emperor saw it with his own eyes. In the dragon barracks, soldiers whispered while polishing their armor. "Why would the emperor allow it?" one asked. "He should have burned her on the spot." Another leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Unless he sees something in her." In the great halls of the nobles, the whispers turned darker. Proud dragon lords, furious at the idea of a human touching royal blood, gathered in secret chambers. "This cannot be allowed," hissed one with scales like polished obsidian. "The emperor loses his mind." Another slammed his clawed hand against the table. "If humans gain favor, what becomes of our power?" The palace itself became a nest of murmurs. Servants who had once walked freely now kept their heads low, speaking only in whispers about the strange girl brought into the emperor's home. Some said she was a witch. Others said she was a prophet. But no one could agree on why the emperor spared her. Inside the palace, the waitress herself felt trapped between wonder and fear. She had never seen such vast halls before. The ceilings were higher than towers, the walls carved with golden dragons that seemed alive when torches flickered. Guards stood at every corner, their eyes sharp, their bodies still as statues. She walked carefully, clutching the baby dragon to her chest, her steps echoing loudly in the silence. Servants who passed by glanced at her with wide eyes, some with fear, others with disgust. None dared speak to her. That night, when she was led to a small chamber near the royal nursery, she sat on the edge of the bed, her arms still wrapped around the child. The baby dragon was weak but peaceful in her care. She whispered softly, telling him small stories from her childhood, the kind she once told to sick children during the war. Though she knew he could not understand the words, she believed he could feel the kindness. What she did not know was that the emperor himself was standing in the shadows just outside the chamber door, listening. He did not enter, but his narrowed eyes watched through the crack, his heart heavy with thoughts he dared not share. The next morning, the kingdom's whispers reached him in the form of bold words from his council. The grand chamber filled with dragon lords, their wings folded, their eyes blazing with pride. One stepped forward, bowing low before speaking with sharp venom. "Great Emperor, forgive my tongue, but the kingdom is restless. They say a human dares to cradle your son as if she were royal blood. This shames our kind." Murmurs of agreement followed, wings rustling like angry fire. Another spoke, his voice louder. Humans are weak, beneath us. If you allow this, what message does it send? That dragons need humans to heal their young? That our blood is not pure enough? The emperor sat upon his throne, his expression carved from stone. He listened without interrupting, his eyes narrowing with each word. Finally, his voice rolled across the chamber, deep and sharp. You speak of shame. You speak of weakness. Tell me, where were your healers when my son cried day and night? Where were your remedies when his wings failed to rise? The chamber fell silent. No one dared to answer. The emperor's gaze swept across them like fire. You call her weak, yet she held him and he found peace. None of you could give him that. His words struck like lightning, silencing even the boldest among them. Still, whispers did not die. They only moved deeper into the shadows, into corners where loyalty could not reach. Outside the palace, the people too were divided. Some said the human girl was blessed by fate, chosen to comfort the child who might one day rule them all. Others spat when her name was mentioned, claiming she was a danger, a trick sent by humans to crawl into the heart of dragon power. In the villages near the borders, humans who heard the story whispered in secret, their hearts filled with something dangerous, hope. For years they had been treated as lesser, crushed under dragon rule. Now, one of their own had touched the untouchable and lived. Perhaps, they whispered, the world could change. The waitress knew none of this. In her chamber she cared for the fragile child with quiet patience, unaware that the whole kingdom was talking about her every move. She brushed his dull scales gently with her hand, fed him warm milk as the palace maids refused to come close, and even sang him soft human lullabies. At times she forgot where she was, forgot the fear, and simply saw the child as he was, a life worth protecting. But outside her small room, storms were building. The noble's pride was wounded. The council's patience was thin. And among the common dragons, resentment grew like fire beneath the surface. It was only a matter of time before whispers turned into something sharper. And in the middle of it all, the emperor sat upon his throne, his eyes narrowed, his mind torn between loyalty to his people and the strange, undeniable truth he had seen with his own eyes, that his disabled son had stopped crying only when held in human arms. The summons came at night. The waitress had just laid the baby dragon to rest, his small body curled against the blanket, his uneven breathing soft but steady. She stroked his dull scales gently, whispering a short prayer that he would see another morning, when the door creaked open and 2 guards entered, their golden armor gleaming in the torchlight. "The emperor calls for you," one said, his voice heavy with authority. Fear surged through her chest. Many whispered she was protected, but protection could vanish with a single order. She nodded, rising carefully, casting one last glance at the fragile child before following the guards through endless palace corridors. The halls stretched wide, lit by fire that never seemed to burn out, carved with dragons that seemed to move in the flickering light. Her steps echoed against the stone as if the palace itself judged her. Finally, the guards led her to a massive door that opened into the throne chamber. The ceiling rose higher than any she had ever seen, pillars shaped like dragon talons clutching the air. At the far end sat the dragon emperor, his black cloak flowing, his eyes glowing faintly even in the dim light. His face was hard, carved in shadow and fire. She bowed instinctively, her hands trembling at her sides. For a long time, he said nothing. His gaze weighed on her like a mountain. Then at last his voice filled the chamber. "Why did you not fear my son?" The question struck her deeper than a blade. Her lips parted but no sound came. She expected accusations, threats, even death, but not this. Slowly, she lifted her head, her voice low and steady though her body trembled. "Because he is a child," she whispered. "He was crying. He needed comfort. I could not turn away." The emperor leaned forward slightly, his burning eyes narrowing. "You speak as though you know suffering. Yet you are only a waitress. What do you understand of pain?" The room grew colder. Memories long buried clawed their way back into her heart, memories she had tried to forget. Her hands clenched into fists, and tears stung her eyes, but she did not look away. "I understand more than you think," she said softly. Her voice shook, but her words carried weight. "Before I served in the tavern, I lived in the borderlands, during the war." The Emperor's eyes flickered, though his face remained unreadable. She took a deep breath and continued, her words spilling like broken glass. "I was young, maybe 12. Our village was caught between armies. There was fire, screams, and soldiers who cared nothing for children. My parents died trying to shield me. I was left alone. But I found others, children, younger than me, some wounded, some unable to walk. No one cared for them. They were abandoned in the ruins, crying in the dark. I could not leave them. I stayed. I carried them, fed them with what scraps I found, washed their wounds with water from broken wells. I was only a child myself, but I became their mother, their sister, their nurse." Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. "Some lived. Some did not. But I held every one of them, even when they stopped breathing. Because no child should leave this world alone." The throne chamber was silent. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, but not in anger this time. He studied her face, saw the pain etched in every line, the strength carved from suffering. His voice was quieter when he spoke again. "And when the war ended." The waitress looked down at her hands, scarred from years of rough work. "When it ended, the survivors were taken by soldiers, scattered to places I never knew. I was left with nothing. So I went to the city, found work in the tavern. I stayed silent because silence was safer. Words bring trouble. But when I heard your child cry, I remembered those children. The ones I lost, the ones I saved. I could not turn my back. Fear did not matter." For the first time, something shifted in the Emperor's face. It was not weakness, not softness, but a flicker of understanding buried beneath years of pride and command. He leaned back on his throne, his claws tapping lightly against the armrest. The chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "You speak with honesty. Too much honesty. Most would beg for life. You tell me stories of the dead." His eyes glowed brighter, sharp and searching. "Do you know what this means? The council demands your death. The nobles demand your removal. Yet you stand here speaking of comfort and tears as if they matter." The waitress lowered her head. Her voice was small but firm. "I have nothing else to give, my lord. Only the truth." The Emperor studied her a moment longer, then rose from his throne. The ground seemed to tremble as he descended the steps toward her. His cloak swept across the floor like a shadow of fire. She dared not move. He stopped just before her, towering above her, his eyes burning into hers. "Your truth is dangerous," he said, his voice low. "But your hands—" He glanced briefly at the chamber doors, as though remembering the child asleep beyond them. "Your hands gave my son peace when no healer could." The waitress dared to breathe again, though fear still coiled around her. The Emperor's eyes narrowed one last time before he turned away. "You will remain in the palace. You will tend to him. But know this, human, if you betray that trust, your life will end before you can draw another breath." She bowed deeply, her body shaking. "I understand." The Emperor did not look back as he left the chamber, but his thoughts burned like storm clouds inside him. The nobles would not accept this. The kingdom would not understand. Yet in the silence of his heart, he knew the truth. This fragile human girl carried a strength even dragons could not name. And though he would never say it aloud, he felt something strange, something dangerous: respect. Days passed slowly inside the palace, and the human waitress found herself in a life she never imagined. No longer was she serving food to noisy tavern guests. Now she spent her mornings and nights inside the royal chambers, caring for the most fragile life in the entire kingdom, the disabled baby dragon. At first she thought she would be watched constantly, and indeed, guards stood at the doors and servants whispered behind her back. But when the Emperor gave his order, none dared defy it. She was allowed to stay close to the child, though every step she took was under silent judgment. The baby dragon was weak, his wings small and bent, his scales dull, his breath shallow. The palace healers had tried for months to cure him, but nothing worked. They gave him medicine, they chanted spells, they poured the richest foods into golden bowls, yet the child only cried and grew weaker. Many believed he would not live long. Yet when the human girl carried him, something changed. He still struggled, but his cries softened, his breathing steadied, his eyes grew calm. It was as if he trusted her in a way no one else could understand. Every morning she lifted him gently from his bed and helped him move, supporting his weak wings with her arms, whispering small words of encouragement. "Just a little," she would say softly. "You are strong. You can try again." The child would flap his bent wings, stumble, and fall into her arms, but instead of despairing she would smile and lift him again. She treated him not like a prince or a dragon, but simply like a child trying to learn. The guards who watched from the corners at first scoffed quietly, shaking their heads at her foolishness. But as the days turned into weeks, even they began to notice that the child was different when she was near. He tried harder, he smiled faintly, he even made small sounds of joy when she sang to him in her soft human voice. The emperor, though he rarely showed his face, often stood in the shadows where she could not see him. His narrowed eyes followed every movement, every touch, every word she gave to his son. He had seen his child fall again and again in the care of dragon healers, had heard nothing but wails of frustration and pain. Yet now, in the arms of a human, his son found strength. Pride warred with humility in the emperor's chest, and he spoke of it to no one. But beyond the walls of the nursery, anger grew. The nobles could not bear the whispers that spread across the kingdom. "The royal child lives because of a human," some said. "The emperor himself trusts a weak creature more than his own people." Envy and hatred burned in their hearts, and though they bowed in the throne room, in their private chambers they plotted quietly. But the waitress knew nothing of these schemes. Her world was the child, his struggles, his small victories. Each night when he finally closed his eyes and drifted into sleep, she sat beside him, her heart heavy with both hope and fear. Sometimes she thought of the children she had lost in the war, the ones she could not save, and tears filled her eyes. She whispered to the baby dragon, "I will not fail you. Not this time." The child seemed to sense her promise, curling closer to her warmth. One afternoon, when the sun shone through the high windows and painted the floor in golden light, the child tried to take a step on his own. His legs were weak, his wings dragged heavily, but he pushed forward, wobbling like a tiny flame against the wind. The waitress held her breath, her hands ready to catch him, but she did not interfere. The child stumbled, then fell onto the carpet, his eyes filling with frustration. For a moment, he cried loudly, his small claws scratching at the ground. But instead of rushing to lift him immediately, she knelt and placed her hand gently on his back. "It's all right," she whispered. "Falling means you tried. You can try again." The child looked up at her, and though tears ran from his eyes, he pushed himself up once more. He took another shaky step before collapsing into her arms, exhausted but determined. She hugged him close, whispering words of pride. What she did not see was the emperor standing in the shadows, his arms crossed, his face hidden in the dim light. His eyes, though narrow as always, softened just slightly. Deep within, he felt something he had not felt in many years: hope. Still, the struggle was far from over. Each day was a battle for the child, and each day brought new whispers through the palace. Some servants said the human girl was bewitched, using strange power to bind the prince to her. Others swore she was a danger, a trick sent by humans to weaken the royal line. And still others, those with kinder hearts, admitted quietly that perhaps she had been chosen by fate itself. The girl ignored the whispers. She had no power, no magic, no strength beyond her hands and her heart. All she could do was be patient, gentle, and unyielding. That was enough for the child. But in the shadows of the court, hatred grew. A few of the nobles whispered of testing her, of proving she was nothing but fragile flesh. The waitress did not know it yet, but danger was moving closer each day. and soon her simple kindness would be tested by fire greater than anything she had faced in her quiet, broken life. The palace halls grew darker with whispers as the days passed, and though the baby dragon gained a little strength with every attempt, he made the air around the royal court turned heavier with tension. The nobles met in private chambers, their voices low but sharp like blades hidden in velvet. They could not bear the thought that the emperor's heir was being raised not by dragon hands but by a fragile human waitress. To them, it was shameful, a wound to their pride that cut deeper with every rumor spreading among the people. In taverns and markets, common folk spoke of the miracle human, the one who could calm the prince's cries and bring life back to his weak wings. Some said she was blessed by fate, others said she was a danger waiting to betray the throne. For the nobles, it was unbearable. Their claws curled, their wings twitched, and their hearts boiled with hatred. Still the emperor said nothing. He watched silently from the shadows, seeing the progress his son made. He noticed how his child no longer cried endlessly at night, how he tried to take small steps each day, how he looked at the human girl with trust in his tired golden eyes. The emperor did not speak of his thoughts to anyone, but deep within he knew the truth. His son was alive because of her. Yet admitting such a truth aloud would set fire to the kingdom. The nobles waited for him to slip, for him to show weakness, but he gave them no chance. He ruled as coldly as ever, his commands sharp, his punishments merciless. But the nobles were not fools. They knew he could not watch the girl every moment, and so they began to plot her downfall. The waitress, however, lived unaware of the storm that brewed around her. Her life was still simple. She woke before dawn, carried the child in her arms, sang to him, and encouraged him to move his wings and legs. She cleaned him, fed him, told him stories in her soft human voice. She did not seek power or favor. She wanted only to see the little dragon live. Sometimes she wondered why the emperor allowed her to stay. Sometimes she feared that one day he would grow tired of her and cast her away. But whenever those thoughts troubled her, she looked at the child's eyes and reminded herself that her duty was to him, not to the throne. Yet the first sign of danger arrived quietly. One night, as she carried the child back to his bed, she noticed the guards at the door were not the usual ones. Their eyes lingered on her too long, their hands rested too close to their blades. She felt a chill but said nothing. The next day she found the food prepared for the child tasted strange, too bitter, too sharp. She did not feed it to him, instead she set it aside and made a small bowl from her own rations. Later she heard the servants whispering of a cook dismissed in shame, though no reason was given. Her heart raced, for she understood someone had tried to harm the child. She did not tell the emperor for fear of causing more danger. She simply became more careful, more watchful. But the danger did not end there. During one afternoon lesson, when she encouraged the baby dragon to flap his wings in the courtyard, a sudden gust of unnatural wind struck down from above. The child fell hard, scraping his scales on the stone. The waitress rushed to his side, shielding him with her body, while shadows passed across the high towers. She looked up, but saw no one. Still she felt eyes watching, full of hate. She held the trembling child, whispering comfort, while her own heart shook with fear. That night she sat awake beside his bed, thinking deeply. She realized then that she was not only a caretaker anymore. She was the only shield the child had against unseen enemies. If she failed him, he would be lost. And though she was only human, though she had no claws, no wings, no magic, she swore to herself that she would fight for him in any way she could. Far away in the council chambers, the nobles raged. Some demanded the emperor remove the human at once. Others argued more darkly that accidents happened in palaces, and no one would question if a fragile human simply vanished. But the emperor's gaze silenced them each time. He gave no explanation, only a cold command. The girl stays. Still the nobles' hatred grew, and their plots grew sharper. The kingdom itself began to divide. In the markets, some people cheered the waitress as a symbol of hope, saying that even the weakest could carry the future. Others hissed in anger, believing the throne was dishonored. And so the palace walls held more than gold and silk, they held the weight of rising hatred. The waitress felt it in every glance, every silence, every heavy step in the corridors. She knew danger was coming closer. She knew her days of quiet care might soon end. Yet as she looked at the child sleeping peacefully beside her, she whispered softly, "No matter what they do, I will not leave you." The baby dragon stirred in his sleep, curling closer to her warmth as if he understood. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, and in the darkness of the council halls the nobles sharpened their claws, preparing to strike. The palace was no longer a place of peace, it had become a battlefield of silence where every whisper carried a hidden blade, and every step echoed with secrets that could kill. The waitress felt it each day as she walked through the endless halls carrying the fragile dragon child in her arms. The walls seemed to listen, the guards' eyes followed her too closely, and the servants who once smiled now turned their faces away. The emperor remained silent, showing no sign of what he truly thought, while the council of nobles burned with growing anger. They wanted the human girl gone, they wanted the boy raised in their ways, even if it meant his weakness destroyed him. They believed only dragons had the right to decide the heir's fate, not some fragile girl from the streets. Yet the emperor's command kept her there, and so the nobles began to weave a darker plan. In a hidden chamber lit only by torches, the most powerful of the nobles gathered their wings, casting huge shadows on the stone walls. They spoke in low voices, careful not to let their anger rise too high, for they feared the emperor's wrath, but their hatred was too strong to be silenced. One of them said the child would never be strong if raised by a human, another hissed that the people were beginning to admire her, and that was dangerous. But then an older noble with scarred wings spoke in a voice so calm it chilled the room. "We cannot strike the emperor directly, but the human girl is different. If she falls, the child will break. If the child breaks, the emperor will lose his heir. Then he will have no choice but to accept another line of blood." The others listened in silence, their hearts beating faster as the plan took shape. They would not kill the boy, for that would bring down the emperor's fury upon them, but they would take away the one person who kept him alive. Without the human's care, the child's weakness would consume him, and the throne would be free for another. That night their pact was sealed in shadows. The waitress, however, felt none of this as she sat by the prince's bed singing softly while the child tried to move his weak legs. She had grown thinner, her eyes tired from sleepless nights, but her spirit remained unbroken. She told him stories of rivers and stars, of simple things from her childhood, hoping to give him dreams beyond the palace walls. The child listened, his golden eyes blinking slowly, and sometimes he even gave a small laugh, a sound that made her heart soar. Yet deep inside she felt the weight of fear. She had already seen signs of danger, the strange food, the sudden gust of wind, the silent guards. She knew someone wanted to harm them, but she did not know who or when. Her instincts told her that darkness was closing in. Days later the plan of the nobles began to move. A servant approached her quietly in the kitchen, offering her a cup of tea, saying it would give her strength. But when she lifted it to her lips, she smelled something bitter and poured it away when no one watched. Later another servant offered to help carry the prince, but when the child reached out, his claws scratched against the man's skin, and the waitress saw hatred flash in his eyes. She pulled the boy back, holding him close while her heart raced. She knew now that danger was not only near, it was inside the palace walls itself. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, she carried the child into the garden, where golden light touched the leaves. There she whispered to him, though he could not yet understand. "They want to take you from me. They want you weak. But I will not let them." The baby dragon looked at her with tired trust, and she felt a surge of strength. Meanwhile the nobles spread rumors in the city, saying the emperor had lost his mind, saying he had given the heir to a lowly human, saying the kingdom would soon fall if nothing changed. The whispers spread fast, turning into shouts in the taverns and quiet questions in the markets. Some believed the rumors, others defended the girl, but the seed of doubt was planted. The emperor heard of this unrest, yet he said nothing to the nobles, only watched them with his cold, unreadable eyes. He knew their claws were moving in shadows, and though he said nothing, he prepared for the moment they would strike. One night when the moon was hidden behind dark clouds, the waitress was returning to her chamber with the child asleep in her arms. The halls were strangely quiet, the guards nowhere to be seen. Suddenly she felt a cold rush of fear that made her steps slow. From the shadows came three figures, cloaked, their wings folded tightly to hide their scales. They blocked her path, their voices low but filled with menace. "The child does not belong to you, human. Give him to us." Her arms tightened around the boy as her heart pounded. She shook her head whispering, "No, he needs me." The cloaked figures stepped closer, their claws glinting faintly. One hissed, "If you keep him you will doom him. We will not ask again." She backed away trembling, but her voice, though weak, did not break. "You will not take him." Just as the first figure reached out, the sound of heavy steps echoed down the hall, and a powerful presence filled the air. The Emperor appeared, his eyes glowing with fury, his wings spreading wide like a storm. The three cloaked figures froze, their bodies trembling under his gaze. He said nothing at first, but the silence was sharper than any blade. Then in a voice like thunder he roared, "Touch her, or my son, and you will die where you stand." The figures dropped to their knees begging forgiveness, but the Emperor's wrath was not so easily calmed. He struck the floor with his claw, and the ground shook. Guards rushed in, surrounding the traitors. The Emperor ordered them dragged away, their screams echoing through the hall. The waitress stood frozen, clutching the child, tears in her eyes from shock and fear. The Emperor turned his gaze to her for a moment, and in that single look she felt both his anger and his strange silent trust. Without a word, he walked away, leaving her shaken but alive. That night she sat by the child's bed, unable to sleep, her mind filled with the image of cloaked enemies and the Emperor's burning eyes. She knew this was only the beginning. The hatred was not gone, it was growing stronger, and now she understood clearly. The secret plot against her and the child had begun, and the kingdom itself was on the edge of war. The palace was restless after the night of betrayal, the walls still carried the echo of the Emperor's roar, and the servants whispered of shadows that dared to challenge his command. The waitress did not sleep, she sat by the child's side, watching his fragile breaths, counting each one as if it could be his last. Every sound in the corridor made her heart leap, for she knew the enemy had not been destroyed, only scattered like snakes waiting to strike again. At dawn the Emperor summoned his council, and with them he called her to something that had never happened before. She walked into the grand hall carrying the child close to her chest, her head bowed, while countless dragon eyes burned into her. The nobles stood tall, wings folded, but their faces filled with cold pride and hidden hatred. The Emperor sat high upon his throne, his golden scales shining with the morning light, yet his expression unreadable. When the silence grew heavy, he spoke, his voice calm yet sharp. "The heir was attacked in my own halls. Treachery hides among us. There will be no peace until truth is found. And so today begins the trial of loyalty." The nobles stiffened, for they knew what that meant. The trial was ancient, a test not of strength but of truth, where one's heart was laid bare before the Emperor's will. None could escape its weight, for a dragon's soul could not lie under the sacred fire. The Emperor's eyes turned to the waitress, and for the first time he spoke of her before all. "This human was chosen by fate to carry my son through weakness into life. Some of you doubt her, some of you plot against her. Today the trial will show where loyalty stands." Murmurs filled the hall, sharp and bitter, but none dared raise their voice. The waitress felt her knees weaken. She did not understand the rules of this world, yet she knew this trial was no game, it was life or death. The Emperor commanded the sacred flame to be brought forth. From the depths of the palace, a great brazier was carried, in its fire burning blue and silver, ancient magic that revealed truth. Each noble was called to stand before it, placing their claw above the flame. If their loyalty was pure, the fire stayed calm. If lies or betrayal filled their heart, the flame lashed out, exposing them. One by one the nobles came forward, the fire flickering with each test. Some passed, their loyalty real though their pride remained, but others screamed as the flame bit their claws, their secret hatred revealed. Those traitors were dragged away by guards, their pleas echoing through the chamber. The waitress held the child close, trembling as her turn drew near. She was not dragon blood, she was human. What would the flame see in her heart? Would it burn her for being different? When her name was called, the hall fell silent, all eyes watching with cruel curiosity. She stepped forward slowly, her arms shaking, but she did not let go of the child. Standing before the sacred flame, she whispered to herself, "I have nothing to hide. I only love him." Then she reached out her hand. The fire rose high, wrapping around her skin, and for a moment the nobles thought it would burn her to ash. But then something strange happened. The The flame softened, turning golden warm and gentle, as if it recognized her heart. It wrapped not only around her but also around the sleeping dragon child in her arms, and the glow filled the entire hall. Gasps echoed among the nobles, for never before had the flame shown such light. The emperor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming but his face unreadable. The flame released her, leaving her unharmed and stronger than before. She stepped back, confused yet filled with relief, while the nobles whispered in fear. One hissed that the flame had chosen her, another growled that it was impossible for a human to be touched by sacred fire. But the emperor raised his claw, silencing them all. The trial has spoken. Her loyalty is true. The heir remains in her care. His words were final, heavy as stone, and though many nobles bowed outwardly, inside their anger grew hotter than ever. The waitress returned to her place, her heart racing but her spirit burning with a strange new courage. She realized now that she was not just a caretaker, the sacred flame itself had marked her. Yet danger did not fade with this trial, instead it became sharper. That night, when the hall was empty, she overheard two nobles whispering in the shadows. Their voices trembled with fear, but also burned with hatred. The flame has betrayed us. It favors her. If the emperor trusts her more than us, then our power is finished. The other answered with venom, then we must strike harder. Not against the emperor, not against the flame, but against her. She is still only human. She can bleed. The waitress froze in the dark, her breath caught in her throat. She knew the trial had proven her loyalty, but it had also painted a target on her back. Holding the child close, she whispered to herself, "No matter what comes, I will protect him." For the first time she did not feel small anymore, she felt like a shield forged in fire. Meanwhile, the emperor sat alone in his chamber, staring into the night sky, his thoughts hidden, even from himself. He had seen the sacred flame embrace the human girl, and though he showed no emotion inside, he was shaken. The flame never lied, and it had chosen her not just for loyalty, but for something greater, something he could not yet name. His claw tightened on the armrest as he whispered to the empty room, "If fate truly chose her, then not even I can change it." Far away in the city, the people began to whisper, not of betrayal this time, but of wonder. They said the human girl had touched the sacred fire, and lived. They said the air was glowing with strange strength when she held him. Some believed she was blessed, others feared she was cursed, but all spoke of her name. And so, without her knowing, she was becoming more than a servant, more than a caretaker, she was becoming a symbol. Yet symbols bring both hope and danger. The trial of loyalty had ended, but the war of shadows had only just begun. The night fell heavy and silent over the palace, yet inside the halls an invisible storm brewed, stronger than ever before. The human waitress moved quietly through the corridors, carrying the baby dragon close to her chest, her heart beating fast but steady. The trial of loyalty had ended, the sacred flame had marked her as true, yet the nobles' hatred had only deepened. They could not forgive that a human, someone they considered weak, had gained the emperor's trust and even the sacred fire's approval. Shadows moved along the walls, watching her, eyes glinting in the torchlight. She felt them, even if she could not see them. A sudden chill ran down her spine, as if the air itself warned her. The baby dragon stirred in her arms, trying to open his small eyes. She whispered softly to calm him. Outside, the nobles who had plotted in secret gathered once again, cloaked figures moving silently in the halls. Their plan had changed. No longer would they attempt open confrontation. They would strike with stealth and cunning. They had learned that the emperor's gaze was sharper than any blade, and that sacred fire would protect the child if the human was near. But the girl's trust in her own courage had given them an idea. If she could be removed for a moment, if the child was left alone, even briefly, the nobles believed their shadows could destroy what no weapon could touch. The palace clock chimed midnight, and the halls became emptier. The waitress carried the child to his small bed and bent over, whispering words of comfort and love. She did not see the small figures creeping through the hallways, cloaked in black, their claws silent against the cold stone. One figure darted from behind a pillar and dropped a small silver vial into the water bowl meant for the child. Another signaled to a third, who had carefully unscrewed a hidden lock in the window to make way for escape. But the human girl had grown vigilant. her senses sharp from nights of hidden danger. She paused, sensing something wrong, a faint odor bitter in the air, and a whisper of movement where none should have been. Her eyes darted to the water bowl and the vial glinting in the moonlight. She snatched it out just in time, her heart pounding as the child stirred in her arms. Suddenly the first cloaked figure leapt forward, attempting to snatch the child, but she turned swiftly, using her weight and strength to push him back. Claws scraped against stone. Shadows twisted across the walls. She shouted for the guards, who came rushing in, their swords drawn. The noble's plot had been discovered, yet the danger was far from over. The figures turned and fled into hidden passages, the palace echoing with their retreating footsteps. She held the child tightly, tears stinging her eyes. The baby dragon whimpered softly but did not cry, as if sensing her fear yet trusting her protection. The guards searched the palace but found only traces of the cloaked figures vanishing like smoke into secret tunnels. The emperor appeared from the shadows, towering and silent, his gaze cold and sharp as blades. He looked at her, the fire of anger burning in his golden eyes, but also something else deeper, something that rarely showed itself. "You discovered their plan," he said in a low voice. She nodded, still trembling but relieved that the child was safe. "I could not let them harm him," she whispered. "He is alive because I will not let go." The emperor stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Your courage has been tested more than any dragon's, yet your heart remains unbroken. That is why they fear you. That is why the shadows strike." He turned and raised his claw toward the walls, as if pointing to unseen threats, and hissed, "But no shadow will succeed while you stand here. I will protect what the sacred flame has marked." The human girl felt a strange warmth at his words, but also knew the danger was far from gone. She had protected the child once and could do it again, but the noble's hatred would never fade. From that night, the palace became a silent war zone. Every corridor could hide an enemy, every shadow could bring a trap. She moved with caution, every step measured, every breath counted. The child grew slowly stronger under her care, trying his small wings, practicing movement with faltering steps, but even this simple act became a challenge. Each day was filled with vigilance and fear, for she never knew when the shadows would strike again. The whispers among the servants grew louder, for now everyone had seen something. The child no longer cried constantly, his scales grew brighter, and his eyes held a spark of life. The people murmured that this human girl was indeed blessed by fate. But the nobles would not relent. Their schemes became more cunning, hiding poison in words, in servants, in food, testing the girl's patience and strength, waiting for a moment when the emperor could not intervene. Yet she did not falter. Each night she held the child close and whispered, "No shadow can take you from me. I will fight until my last breath." And for the first time in many months, the baby dragon smiled, slightly weak but real, and the warmth of his trust gave her strength enough to face whatever came next. Meanwhile, the emperor watched silently, knowing the danger was not gone and that the trial of shadows was only beginning. His narrowed eyes followed every movement of the human girl and the baby dragon, knowing that soon the kingdom itself would be forced to choose between loyalty and hate, and that the outcome would decide the fate of both the throne and the future of his son. The palace was alive with tension, like a storm ready to break, every hallway echoing with the footsteps of guards and whispers of nobles plotting their final moves. The human waitress walked carefully through the corridors, carrying the baby dragon, now stronger yet still fragile, his wings trembling slightly as he leaned against her. She had grown accustomed to fear, but tonight was different. The air itself felt heavy, suffused with the hatred of those who could not accept her presence. Word had spread across the kingdom of the night the shadows had struck, of the plots that failed, of the sacred flame that had chosen her. The people spoke of her in awe, and yet the nobles burned with fury that a human, so weak in their eyes, had gained the emperor's favor. The council convened once more in secret chambers, their wings folded tight, their claws clenched. "The trial of loyalty has passed, yet the child grows stronger every day," one hissed, his eyes flashing. "If we do nothing, the human will shape the air and the kingdom will fall under her hands." Another agreed, adding venomously, "Then we must force the emperor's choice. We cannot strike her openly, but we can force him to act, to remove her or destroy us." Their words were like knives, slicing through the quiet night as they plotted in shadows. Meanwhile, the emperor sat alone in his private chamber, his mind heavy. He had seen the child grow, he had seen the sacred flame embrace the human girl, he had watched her courage and loyalty. His golden eyes were sharp as steel, yet inside him stirred a storm he could not quell. He knew the nobles would not relent, that their hatred would escalate, that the kingdom itself would be forced to choose sides. And so he summoned the human girl to the throne chamber once more. She entered carrying the baby dragon close, her steps steady despite the weight of fear that clutched her heart. The emperor's voice rang across the hall, calm yet commanding. The kingdom has watched you. They have seen your courage, your loyalty, your strength. Now it is time for the final choice. The empire must decide if the child remains in your care. Gasps filled the chamber. Nobles stiffened, their wings bristling with anger, their eyes blazing as if daring the emperor to falter. She held her breath, clutching the child tightly, feeling his small heart beating fast, trusting her as he always had. The emperor continued, "All who serve the kingdom will speak. Their voices will choose the path. Will the heir be raised in dragon hands alone, or with the one who has shown him life and love?" Silence filled the hall for a long moment before the whispers began, soft at first, then louder. Servants spoke, first praising the human girl, telling of nights she had stayed awake, of meals she had prepared, of comfort she had given. Merchants and townsfolk who had heard of her deeds spoke next, their voices trembling with hope and fear, of the miracle she had brought to the prince. The nobles countered, their voices loud and venomous, claiming a human had no place near the heir, that the throne required pure dragon blood, that trust in her would destroy the kingdom. The emperor listened without interruption, his eyes like molten gold burning through each word. Then he raised his claw, silencing all. Enough. The voices have spoken. Yet the empire is not ruled by whispers alone. Loyalty, courage, and the sacred flame are the true measure of a protector. You have seen what humans can do. You have seen what trust can build. Now witness the choice of the emperor. He stepped forward, and his presence filled the hall. The heir will remain with the human girl. She has proven her heart stronger than many of our kind. She has held life in her hands when dragons failed. She has faced shadows without flinching. She has shown what it means to protect and to love. And that is more than any of you have done. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The nobles seethed, their wings trembling, yet none dared speak further. The emperor's choice was final, absolute, and his golden eyes promised fire to any who dared defy it. The human girl knelt before him, tears streaming down her cheeks, holding the baby dragon tightly. The child stirred and weakly flapped his wings, looking at her with trust so deep it made her heart ache with love. The emperor's voice softened for the first time as he addressed her alone. You have carried him through weakness into life. You have faced hatred, betrayal, and darkness. You are no longer merely human. You are the guardian of this empire's future. She bowed her head, voice trembling. I will not fail him, my lord. Not now, not ever. The emperor nodded once, turning away as if the final judgment was done. The chamber emptied, the nobles retreating in fury and fear, the servants whispering words of awe. Outside, the people cheered for the girl who had defied fate and claimed her place beside the heir. She returned to the nursery, placing the baby dragon gently on his bed, his small claws reaching for her. She whispered softly, "We are safe for now." But she knew that the empire would always test her courage, that shadows would always seek to challenge her. Yet for the first time, she felt the strength of belonging, the warmth of trust, the bond between her and the child that could withstand any darkness. And in that moment, even the emperor in his private chamber allowed himself a small thought rarely admitted. Perhaps the future of the kingdom was brighter than he had dared imagine, for it was shaped not only by dragons but by the heart of a human who refused to let life break. The kingdom had made its choice, the emperor had made his, and the human girl had proven that courage, love, and loyalty could change destiny itself. The palace, the throne, and the heir were safe, for now. But the story of her strength and the bond with the baby dragon would be whispered across the kingdom for generations to come. A tale of hope that no shadow, no hatred, and no fear could ever destroy.